Welcome to Building Legendary Leaders, the podcast where leaders leave behind chaos and step into clarity. This is where real stories come alive with the struggles, breakthroughs, and lessons that shape the most effective executives today. Every episode delivers fresh insights you can apply to your own leadership journey. If you are ready to stop putting out fires and start leading with purpose, this is the place for you. Here is your host, Jim Saliba.
Welcome to Building Legendary Leaders. Today's guest has led product innovation inside fast-moving, high-scale environments, including Twitter, Yahoo, where she worked at the intersection of product, creativity, and emerging technology. She has consistently pushed teams to favor creative fiction over process friction, especially when integrating AI and generative media into real products. Outside of her executive role, she's also a podcaster, a path that unexpectedly led her to the very product she now leads. Today, she's shaping the future as the CEO of Descript. Please join me in welcoming Laura Burkhauser.
Hi, thanks so much. Really excited to chat.
We're excited to have you here today, Laura. We had a fabulous conversation when we prepped for the show. I was really mesmerized by your path. So let's form it up for what we're going to talk about today. We're diving into a real transition from a functional leader to a CEO and what gets harder when the scope suddenly widens. Here's how we're going to break it down. What changes when you move from owning a function to owning the whole system? How isolation and delayed feedback reshape decision making at the top, leading teams and functions you never personally done before, making high stakes product and pricing decisions without clear short term signals. And for those who stay to the end, Laura's going to share how she thinks about building for your best customers versus your shallowest ones. You got a lot to talk about, Laura.
Great. Where would you like me to start?
So, why don't you take us back a little bit and tell us about your path of how you got to here as CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I still think about myself in a lot of ways as a product person. And the way that I found product was, I think, like a lot of people who find their way into product, it was a bit of a serpentine path. So I got started in consulting, and in my consulting firm ended up on sort of a strange project where in some ways we were ahead of the curve because we were starting to see video as a way of building top of funnel awareness of the consulting firm that I worked at. And so we were building like an online learning and development portal for executive teams where we could share some of our strategic insights. And we were building this exactly the way that you would expect a consulting firm to be building something, 15 years ago. And that is, let's plan for a year, build for a year, and hope we built the right thing. And I came in during the planning phase and was asked to kind of find the partner that would build this for us and the LMS that would host this for us. And instead, I had just moved to the Bay Area. I was reading about being a lean startup and going from 0 to 1, and suggested that we kind of build the first version of this ourselves using just like Squarespace and YouTube, soft launch it to past clients and get some feedback and sort of build from there. And the partner that I was working with said that sounded like a pretty good idea and gave me a couple of weeks to do it. And that's how we ended up building this product instead. And it was a lot of fun because we also built the business from the ground up, this new kind of learning business we were doing. And I got a big promotion, which was fantastic for my work on that. But unfortunately, it was a promotion to be a more senior kind of consultant. And I had fallen in love with this other thing I'd been doing, which was building stuff, putting it on the internet, hearing what people liked and hated about it, and then building it again. I was like, what's that job? Is that a job? Could I do that permanently? And I found out that was called product management. That took me to business school, an internship at Amazon, and a couple of IC PM roles at early stage startups. and eventually a people management job. Now, I'll say, a pretty good IC PM, largely self taught, pretty immediately, and also a pretty good people manager right off the bat, pretty immediately. Just tried to not be a psycho, and that got me a lot of the way there. But then I got a new kind of role, and that was kind of like a functional head role. And the first time that I had a functional head role, I was not good at it. And I think that's the first big moment in a lot of people's career where you hit the what got you here won't get you there moment. And that's actually what led me to Twitter. Because I was like, okay, I love working at startups. I love the pace that we move at, but here I am now, like a very senior leader of product, a functional lead of of consumer product, and it is a very different job than being an ICPM or even a manager of other PMs. And there is no one I can learn from because the company is too small. So I went to Twitter to work at a bigger company and to see, like, how does this director kind of like manage their org? How does that director manage their org? And kind of learn and get curious and find out how I could be a good functional lead. Then, I worked at Twitter for 3 years. And after the acquisition, I chose to leave, but I didn't really have a plan B. Most of my life, if I'm going to leave a job, I've already done a lot of the footwork to find out, like, what do I want to do next? And this time around, I really just hadn't. And so I took a few months off. And during that time, I substitute taught at my oldest son's school. I got really into baking elaborate desserts. And I started to, with one of my best friends, do this thing that we had always talked about, which is start a podcast, a very silly podcast. And we'd never done anything like it before. And, we just started looking around for the tools that we should use. And that is how I found this product called Descript, which is a podcast and video editor. And when I used Descript, I had been kind of burnt out on tech after leaving social media, like a lot of people who work in social feel after they leave. Very fast paced, but you kind of start to feel disconnected from like the thing that made you fall in love with tech in the first place. And that had happened to me. And at the time, I was actually asking myself, like, is anything interesting still happening in tech? It was right before ChatGPT kind of came out. And when I used Descript, I had that moment of like, oh, this is why I got into product management. Like, this is that feeling that I had when I built and launched the first product ever, where you just fall in love with a product. And it's because Descript not only kind of felt magical to use and did a job for me, but it also changed the way that I thought about myself. It made me feel like I could be a really creative person and supported me through this totally different path that I was starting to take in creating content on the internet. And so I ended up just reaching out, doing cold outreach to the team and saying, "Are you hiring product people? I love this product." And they hired me, and I pretty quickly became the head of product at Descript and worked really closely with Andrew, the founder CEO, for a couple of years. And over that time, began transitioning into a broader leadership role at the company that then became complete last August when I became the CEO.
Wow, that is quite a journey and unexpected too. So, what did you fall in love with Descript that that got you to this point? One thing.
It was the text-based editing. Being able to edit 60 minutes. I mean, you just heard my intro. I'm not exactly brief. And so being able to drag a recording into Descript and be able to edit that transcript and edit the video as a result of editing that, it was just like one of those moments where your mind is blown and you realize you're never going to edit anything the same way again. And you wonder why everyone in the world isn't using this product.
So, that love of podcasting got you to Descript. You became a product manager for it, and now you're the CEO. What's different about being the CEO and owning the whole system versus that function of a product manager?
I mean, it's an entirely different role. Even if you're a really product-minded CEO, it's just a totally different job. And I'd say for me, the biggest difference is the feedback loops. So I think I've never been someone who's been overly reliant on praise from my manager to feel that I was doing a good job. But I have really relied as a product manager on looking at the feedback loops that releasing features gives you, right? Like you do a lot of research to release the right stuff, you launch it into the world, you look at the metrics, you listen to the customer feedback, and you know pretty immediately, like, did this solve the problem that I was trying to solve or did it not? And if it didn't, you're like, great, let me try again. And that was the thing that made me love product management so much. But when you're the CEO, the feedback loop is so much longer because the metric that you own is the overall health of the company, and a release every 2 weeks, doesn't let you know if you're on the right track or not. And I think in general, the amount of feedback you get as a CEO, you don't get a lot, right? You don't have a manager, you don't have any peers. No one is particularly incentivized to tell you the truth. And so you find yourself operating suddenly in this very senior role without a lot of feedback and with only very long feedback loops on how your strategy is working out for the business.
I like how you talk that your feedback loops are so much longer. When I talk to so many leaders, I try to show them that we can measure activity. That's easy. We can measure output. That's even easy. But measuring outcomes, your business outcomes, we're hoping that the activity leads to the right output, leads to the right outcomes, but it's a lagging indicator. It takes a long time for it to go out, people to see it, to come back. And are we moving the business the way we want to move it?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that, you know, I don't have a perfect solution for this, but I've found that, in my transition, one of the things that I've started to do is listen to the customer and bring them in more than I ever have before because they are actually quite incentivized to tell me the truth. And so now I let my customers be my truth tellers about the product. And I've created many new channels that they can talk to me. And if you're a Descript customer, find me. I will talk to you and listen to all of your thoughts on the product. And that's like a way that I can get kind of early noisy signal on if we're doing right, if we're making good decisions. The other thing that I've done is obviously I've gotten a coach, and I interviewed a lot of coaches. There are some that are more like touchy feely and really about the emotional game. I honestly picked the meanest coach I could find. If she's listening, I'll say like, I love you. Yeah, you hold me accountable in ways that I need someone. I need one meeting a week where I'm like, oh crap, I've really got to have my stuff together for this meeting. And that's how I feel about meeting with my coach. And it's good to have that in your life. So that's something I've sought out as well. But a lot of it is just like learning to have conviction. Is trusting that, like, is accepting the fact that you aren't going to have the perfect feedback loops, at least like not in the short term. Working to make sure you have the right long term feedback loops, but then really articulating what it is you have conviction about and going out and kind of professing that conviction in different spaces, hearing from other people how they're thinking about it and being willing to change. Um, but then just kind of knowing like this is the bet that I'm going to take, and you can't be the CEO if you're not willing to have conviction and take a long-term bet and take that risk.
So, two things jumped at me while you were saying this. One, thank you very much for giving a plug for us executive coaches and the work that we do. And yes, I am originally from New York and I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And I do interrupt and kind of say it how it is, which is not for everyone. So yes, thank you very much for that plug.
Shout out to mean coaches everywhere.
Here we are. Here we are. We need to do more. But yes, it's good to have someone to be a sounding board because you don't have one. It's good to be kind of devil's advocate and some of my New York coming out and, WTF, Laura, what the hell are you thinking? Right? to really test that. And I believe we need it at all levels. You talked about director level a little bit at Twitter, and I think that's where leaders have a big problem because we get promoted based on our technical skill, and we're amazed, or companies are amazed that people don't have leadership and management skill to match. And that takes time and it's a whole different skill. So, as you move into this position as CEO, you have the problem of leading teams and functions that you have never personally done before. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that, someone once said that the founder is the pace car of the company. And I think that that needs to be true of me too, as the CEO of still a startup. And what that means is like the way that you show up at work and the bar that you have for yourself and the people around you becomes the quality bar that you set for the entire organization. And I think that that is very different. You're differently incentivized to hold people accountable as the CEO than I was even as the VP of product. As the VP of product, if I met someone in another function, it kind of did us all a little bit better for me to assume that that person was reasonably competent and assume that they had good intent and like assume that we could have a really friendly relationship. Because so much of being successful in product is having good working relationships cross functionally. And the value of that good relationship is critical in order for you to get work done. When you are the CEO, I think that the value of that relationship is unfortunately lower. And this might be something controversial. I'm just sharing like my honest experience. And that is that I think I've had to shift into a world where I don't assume kind of competence from every person. Everyone starts at zero. Maybe they start on a scale of like negative 100 to positive 100 competence. They maybe start at negative five, right? Like, and then through things like close questioning, like one of the things that I like to do when I'm trying to assess talent very quickly is just ask someone to explain what they're doing to me. So don't assume that I know how to do that job. I don't. But if someone is good at what they do, they ought to be able to answer and explain like I'm five, what it is that they're doing, why it matters, to answer the second why and the third why, and really be able to get deep on the stuff that they're responsible for. And I think that, using close questioning to kind of instantly calibrate on where you think someone you're talking to is important. And then what you do about it, right? If I'm the VP of product and I think that someone that I'm working with isn't quite hitting the quality bar, maybe there's some influence that I have on what might be done around that about that situation, but it's ultimately like not my responsibility and not always my business. Like of course we're all owners, but there's a way that you kind of like default to humility when again, you're not that person's manager, they're not even in your org. As a CEO, everyone's in your org. And it's your job to hold the quality bar to every single person. So when I talk to someone and I don't think that they're hitting that bar, there's immediate action. That action isn't necessarily like, oh, let's exit that person. It's often like, let me talk to that person's manager because like I did not calibrate above the negative five that I went into that conversation with after talking to this person for half an hour, because like I feel that is a much bigger immediate problem because of the level of ownership that you immediately feel when you are the CEO.
So, you're constantly calibrating and understanding talent. Do you ever stop?
No, I do think that there are people on the team that show up enough and good enough consistently that you kind of like they're in, right? And now they'd have to work to like lose trust. So there is sort of like a threshold at which you're like, okay, that person is high trust. And once someone really proves themselves as being high trust, I think that like, you know, it that person should be recognized, celebrated, given freedom, promoted, compensated well. Uh, and so I think like there is sort of a moment where you achieve that trust at an organization or with me. Yeah. So maybe in that sense, like sometimes you stop, but you're always Yes, I think that talent management is a huge part of what you're doing, as CEO at a scale that is completely different than when you're managing a 7-person team.
I totally agree, but I'm going to kind of push back a little bit. I think no matter what level of a leader you are, director, VP, you should always be doing that for your organization, people that work for you. You don't have to wait to be the CEO.
Yes, I think so for your own organization, right? But like to me, that's like a much easier scale to manage. Like when I was managing the product team, 7 product managers, that really looked like I knew every one of them deeply and I knew the job that they did deeply. So it wasn't it felt natural and comfortable for me to assume that I was allowed to have an opinion about whether they were good or not, right? Because it's like, this is a job I've done. I've done it for years. Uh, and I hired you and I'm going to write your performance review in January. And like, this is absolutely my job and I'm in charge of it. As a CEO, I am like that about every single person that I encounter in every meeting every second of the day, which is just it's a different scale. And it does, if you're someone who has humility, it pushes you on that humility because there's a voice in your head that's just like, well, you don't know how to do this job. What do you mean you don't think this person is hitting the quality bar? Could you hit the quality bar? And I think you kind of have to say like, understood. Um, but and yet I don't think that they're hitting it. And I think that that can feel uncomfortable. And it felt new to me.
So you use 2 words a lot there, quality and trust. How do you measure those in your world?
I'm trying to think of like the right altitude to answer that question on. But I think for me, the way that people build trust is through transparency, like commitment and lively debate. And so I think if someone, I think someone who and kind of ownership, like the things that build trust for me are when someone understands the problems that they own and need to deliver on, are able to sort of unblockably pursue solutions to those problems, but I talk about transparency and lively debate because I think like the people who are really high trust are often very open about their beliefs and share them very openly in the hope that they'll meet someone who's able to defeat that belief and give them a better one, right? And so I think that people who operate that way, where they're like, I know I own this problem. I'm going to operate as if it's my job to solve it. But I'm going to do it in this very open and transparent way, inviting people to disagree with me because ultimately what I'm looking for is truth. And I think people who operate in that way can pretty quickly become high trust and make high quality decisions.
So you threw another word in there that I love, owning and ownership. So often I work with C-suite executives like yourself and in larger organizations, and they'll say, well, my leadership team are glorified managers waiting for me to tell them what to do. I want them to own it. I want them to follow through. I want them to take it on. Is that what you're looking for to build that high trust?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I think you don't want order takers. And I think like that's where I don't often see that at the executive level because usually you don't like you ought to be in your hiring process really weaning out order takers. Often where I see order takers is at the director level, which is why I actually the march in of the directors at an organization is a very dangerous moment for a company because that's where you're most likely to hire people that are really good at facilitating meetings and at kind of like making the trains kind of run on time, but they kind of like to take the pulse of the room and find out how we're all feeling about things and then kind of operate according to the wisdom of the crowd. And I think that's always going to sort of steer you towards mediocrity. And I instead like to stay in a world of sort of high ownership people that are close to the work that can debate about what the right answer is, and that are sort of unafraid to be a bit iconoclastic.
I understand exactly what you're talking about. We could talk about that all day long. But we did say we were going to talk a little bit about your pricing decisions, how you make high stakes pricing decisions without clear short term signals.
Well, I think that I approached it from first principles. And that is that I was feeling a tension when as I told you, I think I like care deeply about customers. And at the end of the day, feel that I hold myself accountable to the Descript customers more than almost anyone else. I suppose I need to say that I have a, fiduciary obligation to value shareholders, but I think like it's really the customers whose feedback I look to every day to decide if I'm doing a good job. And one of the things that I noticed is that we were with our pricing structure and our marketing strategy highly incentivized to serve the shallowest customers using Descript. Um, because we were when you have completely seat-based pricing, the only way you can grow is maximizing the number of new seats that you have every single day, the number of new seats that you add every single day. And as you kind of like go out and out and out, you're looking for people who are have a lower willingness to pay, who maybe have like a lower need to make a video every single week or every single day, um, and who have not a lot of patience to learn software. And so you're really trying to and who may want to use you for all number of things. So we were really optimizing for feature breadth over feature depth. Um, and we weren't um, able to dedicate the engineering resources that I really wanted to dedicate to things like reliability and performance. Which, if you're in the app all the time, pressing the play button all the time across long projects, is just so critical for quality of life. And so when we made the decision to switch to usage-based pricing, what really excited me about it, and I think the message that was able to help everyone get on board internally with this change is like when we are able to care deeply about how deeply people use Descript, that that correctly incentivizes the business to build the kind of product that we can all be really, really proud of. Um, because I think a lot of people who work at Descript are not super interested in exactly what our pricing scheme is, right? But they are really interested in that thing that brought me, like the thing that brings, I think, a lot of incredible talent to companies, which is building the world's best product, building a product that we can feel really proud of, that we want to put our name on and pour our hours into. And so I think like uh, aligning pricing so that we can correctly value our most active users um, gives us the ability to focus on building the product that we're proudest of.
Did that shift happen right away? Was there some stumbling? Was it perfect?
We are still in process. I mean, so that the code has shipped, right? But it's a what we need to do is now make good on that. Like, I think that we'll really be through this in 6 months when we're all using the product and we're like, yes, so many of those paper cuts that we were feeling a little bit about are gone, and the performance is 4 or 5 times better. The reliability, we're not having any incidents. Like, that's when I think we're gonna feel like, "Oh, great." So I'd say, like, we're in that change, but, we're heading in the right direction.
So we talked about your leadership, how you got here, some of your thoughts about what trust and ownership is about. We talked about product. So that was pretty wide in breadth. If you were a leader listening to this today, what is the one thing you want them to walk away with that they could use Monday morning?
I think that I would encourage every leader to open themselves up more to the talent management part of their job. Because I think that we're in a moment, a cultural moment right now, where it is unpopular to acknowledge that there are skills that matter outside of being a super IC. Like we sort of skewed towards we should only hire managers who don't want to be managers, who are really good at being ICs. And so I think the culture, there's sort of a pendulum swift or a pendulum movement that happens every few years towards like, do we like managers or do we not like managers? And we're in this moment right now where like we're supposed to be suspicious of managers and really think like IC work is the most important work. And I would say like managers have special skills. If you are a leader, you are probably a people manager. And one of the most important ways that you can have impact, scaled impact in your organization is to be a bar raiser for talent, is to challenge yourself to having the like to having like a really strong bench of very talented people on your team and to be pretty ruthless about it.
I think that is perfect. There are so many organizations and people that I coach in large organizations in different industries. Maybe one, especially that I have in the back of my head, that they have people who stay in jobs for a very long time. They're with companies 15 years. So they get used to having those people, but when it comes time to move up and people going, their bench is very narrow. It's not very deep, and they run into problems. So I love the whole thing about watching your talent, growing your talent, measuring your talent, because in the end, the company can't move without the right people in it. It is about their people. So, Laura, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about your personal side so people can get to understand you. Tell us about growing up. Where was that?
I grew up in Syracuse, New York.
Well, both New Yorkers. Here we are.
Yes, Syracuse, a little far away from Brooklyn. Is that where you're from?
I'm from Long Island. So, yes, Syracuse, you're up in the snow belt, right?
Sure did.
Do you miss the snow?
No, I don't. California has made me very soft. I actually moved back to New York for a year in like 2018, and I remember carrying a stroller up an icy subway staircase and thinking, I got to get out of here. And a few months later, I moved back to California.
I do know this when I go back to New York, especially Long Island, the snow is not the light and fluffy stuff you see in Tahoe or something like that. It's wet, it's heavy, it's slushy.
Brown.
No, I don't miss it. So, tell us about growing up in Syracuse.
Um, well, I have 3 sisters, and, I grew up in really an amazing neighborhood. No one had any fences, everyone had kids, and so I remember spending a ton of time just outside playing kick the can and other, uh, like, kids' games. Kind of like an idyllic childhood is how I'd talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's different now. I look at my daughters who are grown and they have 3 little boys between my 2 daughters, and every play date is planned. Everything is planned. They don't get to really just go out and play like I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, you're right. Everything does feel much more structured and planned. I have 3 sons now.
So that ability to be able to be unstructured, how did that form your values that you might use now as a CEO?
I don't know. I do think that it's funny. I feel like growing up in a big family, and maybe yeah, having a lot of unstructured time is part of it. I've always felt like I have a higher tolerance for chaos than a lot of folks. And one of my bosses once told me, there are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are chaos Muppets and order Muppets. So you have like Animal and Gonzo, or like chaos Muppets and like Kermit's and order Muppet. And I am a chaos Muppet. And I think there are ways that really helps me be a leader at a startup where things are very dynamic, and also in a moment in tech and in time right now that is very dynamic. I can be improvisational. I'm not bothered when things need to change suddenly. I do think it can work against me too. I think that I can cause unnecessary stress for people on my team that would prefer to have an understood way of doing something. I'm the kind of person who n- can chafe with a lot of process or structure and would rather keep things loose and like reinvent how I want to do something every day that I do it. And I think there are just other people who find that quite unpleasant. And so I found what I try to do is make sure there's a good mix of leaders, so that I can be supplemented for by other people on my team who are happy to create process where it's needed. Um, and that there's like a fun tension and interaction between the Chaos Muppets and the Order Muppets at Descript.
So a balance of Muppets is your secret sauce, it seems.
Please make that the hook clip at the beginning. Yes, my quote is, "A balance of Muppets is my secret sauce for creating a good executive leadership team."
Okay, I'm taking notes to that. Okay, so this was great. I love our conversation. I could do this all day with you, but I think we're at a point where we can start closing. Tell people how they can reach you.
Well, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. I've been trying to practice what I preach. I tell everyone, everyone can build video with Descript. And so I try to live into this by posting videos on LinkedIn about leadership content like this or about other things. I'd love to connect with you. And then, of course, come find me on Descript. I am always willing to talk to people who have product feedback. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to also toss a free month or two of the product to people.
Well, we're going to close there. Thank you very much for being with us today, Laura. And that's another episode of Building Legendary Leaders.
Building Legendary Leaders podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.